Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Spring is coming.
You know how today, I got to say, total diversion. Today's opening day in baseball. So you're going to look at grass, or you're going to see it. Yes. You can't, I know it's hard to figure out where to watch the Twins these days, but the grass is out there and it really does feel like spring. You're going to be able to watch people playing outside, and that just feels great.
It does, and I love baseball. But for me, the spring, that had totally gone by me, that it was the opening day here.
That's okay.
But what's got me excited is the seedlings growing in our basement.
Oh, another great sign.
Oh,
yes.
Man, yeah, the seedlings, and of course, I've done some seeding already. They've popped up. I've done some transplanting. Other things like tomatoes I'm going to do this weekend, planting those, because April 1st is about the target date for seeding tomatoes. And my basement floor looks like a bag of potting mix exploded.
Well, that's
part
of the process.
It means there's activity.
And you get that smell, too.
Oh, yeah. My basement does. It's an unfinished basement. It does have that earthy greenhouse type aroma.
And it's nice, too, like just walking around. Some places I've seen the crocuses start to pop up.
Yes.
It's really nice.
Yes. Our tulips have not poked through yet. I've got mulch over them, wood mulch that I need to loosen a little bit to make sure the tulips aren't kind of languishing underneath there. So thanks for the reminder, John. I need to do that. And the other thing, of course, we are not far from visiting garden centers.
No.
In fact, I like doing the garden centers now, even though it's a little early.
Out now. That's right.
See what they got going on and get that aroma. Fill your lungs with that fresh greenhouse aroma. And the garden centers, it's going to be fun at the appropriate time to shop for trees and shrubs.
Yeah.
And so anyway, in a few minutes, we're going to visit with, speaking of garden centers, we're going to visit with Charles Elhard with the North Dakota Department of Agriculture and talk about some of the woody plants and things that we see at garden centers. But in the meantime, gardeners have been writing in. And so I got two questions about a similar topic that I thought we could talk about. And both questions were similar themes. And so, again, thanks for writing in. Both letters were similar. And they indicated, brought my hibiscus in last fall for overwintering. They've done well. Should I trim them back now? Okay. And again, thanks for writing. The answer is yes. During winter, when the days are short and the sun is low on the horizon, sunlight level is low, the growth that these overwintered plants put out is kind of spindly and a little straggly. And so by pruning them back now in late March or early April, by pruning them back quite severely, that will coax fresh new growth to come out of those branches. And we can also repot them. Give them some fertilizer now every couple of weeks, a good water-soluble type. They'll start putting out fresh new growth so that when those plants go back out after frost is passed in May sometime, then they'll have nice fresh growth and be started. So how far to cut back? I think with most hibiscus, they appreciate 1/3 to 1/2 of their branches being cut back.
Okay.
And that will give them a whole new lease on life. So again, thanks for writing about your hibiscus.
All right. And if people have other questions for you that they want read on the air, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, that's Kinzler, at ndsu.edu. And again, so Charles, welcome. Charles Elhard. And now give us your official title.
Sure. Good morning, John and Don. It's great to be here. Great to talk to you. Avid listener of the podcast.
Good.
So
good.
We're on the right track there. So I'm a plant protection officer with the North Dakota Department of Agriculture. I've been there for, 15 years now. I grew up on a small dairy farm in Judd, North Dakota. Graduated from NDSU with a horticulture degree.
I've been through Judd.
Have you?
Yes, I have. I know where Judd is.
The village of murals.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, small town. But went to NDSU, graduated with the horticulture degree. I had worked at greenhouses since I was about 16 years old, worked at a nursery north of town here through college, and then started with the Department of Ag in 2010.
Great. So tell us a little bit about your position with the Department of Ag. What is that program? What does that involve?
Sure. So I cover a lot of areas, actually. The nursery program, of course, is what we're going to talk about a bit. Also, export certification is a pretty large part of my job. Commodities.
Would that be like exporting a nursery type stock or greenhouse material?
Yeah, definitely nursery. We have some nurseries that ship nursery stock into Canada. We have to inspect and certify those for movement. And then, of course, your grain commodities. We produce a lot of grain and seed in North Dakota, so those have to be certified as well. We also do pest surveys. We're looking for invasive pests and diseases that don't occur in the United States or North Dakota, and just trying to maintain our freedom from those.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, because we should do a special program maybe this summer on the emerald ash borer.
Sure.
Because, of course, the North Dakota Department of Agriculture and you closely involved monitor that invasive insect. And also Japanese beetle. Yes. We should talk about that.
Yes.
That's kind of a new one on the horizon also, isn't it?
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the kind of the nursery laws and some of the things that pertain to that in the program.
Sure, absolutely. Almost every single state has a nursery law of some sort. Some regulate woody plants only. Some regulate anything that will overwinter, so perennials. A few, especially in the South, will regulate annuals and tropicals. But here in North Dakota, we are woody plants only, so trees, shrubs, woody vines, and the Department of Ag is charged with administering that law. It requires all nurseries, landscapers, garden centers, or anybody that's selling nursery stock to maintain a license and then only sell nursery stock that's been inspected and certified as free from pests and diseases.
Oh, sure. So in the North Dakota Century Code, this is an actual law. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, what a great law, because that protects those of us who buy. Mm-hmm. That's a great protection for us.
Yeah, it helps the customers. The consumer.
It's comforting to me to know that there is a law that causes this material to be inspected rather than just a free-for-all.
And I don't know how many people I didn't really think about that until we started, talking about this. To kind of point out that there is somebody like yourself who will go out and do the inspections and check things out and make sure that it's, it is kind of, it's backing up kind of truth in advertising, right? It's saying like, yes, this can survive in our area.
Right. And when I started this job back in 2010, I started as a nursery inspector. I had no idea this even existed. So definitely have learned a lot.
That's awesome. So there is an actual licensing procedure. Yes. How do places go about getting licensed to sell?
So they can reach out to us, the Department of Ag. We have a paper application they send in. They let us know where they're sourcing their stock from, if they're growing it themselves, say from cuttings or grafting or from seed even. And then we verify sources and we issue those nursery licenses.
So what are the main things, what are the main reasons why the nursery material is inspected? What are the main things what are the reasons for it?
Yeah, the pests and diseases are probably the biggest, most important thing. Of course, we don't want new pests in our environment affecting the trees that are already existing. But there's also, as you mentioned, the consumer protection aspect. So we have provisions that deal with labeling requirements or viability standards, how stock is packaged or in the container. Of course, you want the soil covering all the roots and things like that.
It's interesting, like on labeling, what are some of the requirements like for labeling on trees and shrubs?
So they have to be labeled either with the recognized common name or botanical name. And then when it comes to things like fruit trees or specific plants that have a cultivar name, specific selections, they also have to have that cultivar name. Or like, for example, Honeycrisp apple can't just be labeled apple. It has to be labeled Honeycrisp apple.
Oh, awesome. And again, that's great protection because I want to know what that apple cultivar is so I'm not buying Delicious or something with just a generic apple. The other thing that I love, too, is I love it when there's the botanical name on that, even if it's in fine print. Because then, like, for example, hydrangea. I can see if it's hydrangea maculata, that's kind of more like the floristy type things, and versus that. So yeah, that labeling is awesome too.
What do you do if, because in a nursery, they get in big trucks of shipments and things like that, labels can fall off. Mm-hmm. What do you do if you find something that's not labeled?
Sure. That's challenging in our environment. We get wind all the time too.
Right,
so we
exactly.
see a lot of nurseries that have their stock just out in the wind, and tags will blow away, and hopefully they've grouped them together so you can see all the ones that look alike. But apple trees, for example, when they come from the wholesalers, have a specific color code of paint on the stem.
that is awesome.
So they can re-verify what cultivar that is with that color coding.
Yeah, so next time it's kind of a little, maybe a trivia type thing, but next time you're at the garden center, look at some of those trees or fruit trees, and you'll see like one or maybe two different colors of paint on there. And that's a great way that, the wholesalers keep track of it that way, but also then the retailer can, if a tag blows off, they'll say, oh, yeah, it's got a little blue band of paint and a little pink band of paint. Then they know, oh, yeah, that's what it is, Honeycrisp. And so, yeah, that's awesome. And I suppose when you look at potted type material that has been shipped in, I suppose then you're looking for insects and any sign of diseases and things.
Yeah, you were saying that one of the things you check for is to make sure the soil is covering the roots. Mm-hmm. If that's not, is that more of a case just to keep it healthy, or is it a case of, is there another aspect to that? Ultimately that's why you want that, but why are you involved with that?
Sure. So that's falls into those viability standards or storage standards. You want to make sure that soil covers the root to maintain the viability of the plant. So sometimes when they tip over in the wind, a bunch of soil falls off. Maybe it's a tree and the tree doesn't stay standing in the pot because it doesn't have any soil. So we're just trying to maintain the health.
So, and again, it's consumer protection.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And it was one of the main aspects of that, too, that you've mentioned is material that is well adapted and winter hardy for North Dakota. And of course, one thing that I love is the official non-hardy woody plants list. Tell us a little bit about that, because there's actually an actual legal list, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. There is a provision that was added back in late 1980s. There was a push by industry to add this provision to the law. If there was consumers that would come to our local garden centers and just say, "Oh, I bought these plants from such and such multinational chain store, and they didn't survive. Why? What am I doing wrong?" Well, the peaches they bought or the red delicious apples they bought, they're not winter hardy for our climate. And so there was just why are they allowed to sell these? And industry came to the Ag Department in the North Dakota legislature and said, what can we do? So we don't flat out ban people from growing these, but we do require them to be labeled with a non-hardy in North Dakota sticker.
Yeah, and so where I found this list, and I see it's updated each year, like for 2025. So where I found that list was I just searched for North Dakota Department of Agriculture non-hardy woody plants list, and up it popped. It's quite a nice document, quite detailed, the botanical names, common names, and it's what a wonderful list. And I appreciate that there is that actual list. And so now tell us a little bit more about these. Okay, so when you do your inspections, if you find material that is on this list, explain a little more what you do or what the garden center has to do.
Sure. So we go out. Usually April through October is when we do the majority of our what we call dealer inspections, and these are folks that are reselling nursery stock that's probably grown by somebody else. But we go around and we're checking for all those aspects of the law. But if we came across something that's on our non-hardy plants list, which is a 7-page long list right now, the more inspections you do, you get used to all these plants. But if we come across a plant that's on the list, we will check the tag, see if it's labeled. Sometimes nurseries will label it properly with non-hardy in North Dakota. but sometimes they won't have a label on it. We may call over the manager or the garden center, whoever's in the garden center, and explain the requirements. And if there's just a few plants, our inspectors will throw the tag on for them and just let them know why we did that.
What does the tag look like?
If you go into the store and you see a bright pink or yellow neon sticker,
so it's noticeable.
Yeah, the Department of Ag will definitely have been there.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So it stands out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes garden centers, if they do label them themselves, maybe it's just a white sticker, but we like to verify that at least it's on there.
And maybe after a quick break, maybe we could talk about how often you do these nursery inspections and maybe some of the more common woody plants and shrubs, trees that you encounter when you're visiting and that may be on this non-hardy woody plants list. A list for us to kind of look out for.
Absolutely.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
All right, we're back with Charles Elhard, and we're talking about your job as say it again.
A plant protection officer.
Yeah, with the North Dakota Department of Agriculture, right?
Correct.
And you're housed on the NDSU campus?
Yes, I'm actually housed on the NDSU campus. Most of our staff is out in Bismarck at the state capitol, but yeah.
And so what we're talking about now is that you go out into the retailers, you'll go out into the stores, and you'll look for things that kind of like what is, in particular, what we're talking about now is what is actually winter hardy? What are the plants that can survive? And that sometimes stores will get in something that maybe won't be able to survive outside, but you probably could bring it inside. But your job still is you're talking about going around and put a sticker on that just so that that the consumer recognizes it. The consumer has kind of fair warning that this plant may not survive, maybe as planted out in the garden, planted out in the yard.
So I'm curious, what are some of the more common things that you encounter? I'm curious.
Sure. Definitely the most common are some fruit trees and things like blackberries. Blackberries commonly show up. Sometimes they might survive, but they die to the ground every year and you don't get any fruit. So what's the point of planting a blackberry if you can't get fruit?
True.
Peaches are one that shows up a lot. Sometimes, like Contender is labeled as Zone 4 peach, but that one just struggles unless you have this really nice microclimate.
Yeah, we're not really in peach territory, are we?
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately not.
So last year I pulled some stats, and dappled willow, which is Salix integra, but it's a variegated willow, white and pink and green leaves. That was found most often at nurseries. It's on the non-hardy list because it will die to the ground or not survive at all every year. Magnolias. There's a few magnolia cultivars out there that are hardy.
Yeah, NDSU developed a new one, but yeah, you have to choose that one.
Yeah, you have
not
to
something
choose wisely.
Yeah, choose wisely.
We do, and to go back to the non-hardy list, we do have a column on there that says exceptions. So there are some cultivars within the species on the non-hardy list.
I like that
maybe
because,
hardy.
for example, magnolia, you indicate what's not, but then you do break that out that, here is one or two that will work.
Right.
So, yeah, for example, willows, you mentioned the non-hardy one to watch out for, but of course willows, there are types that will grow here. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Right. Yes, and to research all
what
that every year.
What are some of the others that you encounter?
We come across
to mind?
A lot of boxwood. If you're familiar with boxwood, it's a evergreen shrub. Hates our winter.
Yeah, it's kind of a little like a broadleaf evergreen, kind of like. And I've always admired little boxwood hedges.
They grow very thick, very dense, right?
You
and
can
they
make
can be
neat little shaped hedges of those. I've always wanted one, but again, I don't want it to die out, so I don't plant it.
On the East Coast, they're everywhere. They are old and beautiful, and unfortunately,
do you find any holly?
We do find holly. We find quite a bit of holly. That's up in the top 10 We see some holly. There is one holly species that is hardy here, winterberry.
Yeah, I should try that one.
Yeah, it does quite well. I have a couple in my yard.
What about one that I get lots of photos sent because it's all burnt up, and that's dwarf Alberta spruce. Is that on the list?
Dwarf Alberta spruce is on the list. It's
no wonder.
That's had a little contention over the
You'd
years.
think with the name it would be Alberta, Canada. You would think that it would lend itself to our zone.
Maybe it was a marketing tool, but I get so many emails from that they're just burnt to a crisp after a year, winter burn.
Yeah.
And
yes, and that's one.
I'm happy that's on the list.
The species is actually white spruce, which is where Black Hills spruce also comes out of. But dwarf Alberta spruce has a very tender needle that if it's not in the right spot on the right day at the right year,
exactly,
it's just a very touchy kind of
it is
sensitive.
Yeah, good.
I would imagine maples can be kind of hit and miss, or I suppose in our area. And I know the Japanese maples is something that I've actually seen in a big box store retailer, and it did have that. It hit because I got very excited. I was like, but then I did see that this was on the Minnesota side, so it wasn't the bright pink. I can't remember if it was bright pink or not, but it was a warning, and it said this is not winter hardy. This is not.
What I love about this list and this program, it is so practical. These are things that actually happen. Plant dwarf Alberta spruce, you're going to have probably some tragedy.
So there's this list of the things that are not winter hardy, and I know that while this is this part of your job is consumer protection, is there another step to that is like, if you like this willow but you can't grow it here, is there anywhere on the list like alternatives, suggestions? If you like this thing, it may not work here, but this you might have better luck with this. Or what would you suggest for people who look on this list and find the things that they want are on this list? What would you suggest them to? What would you suggest for them to do as their next step?
Sure, kind of like a don't try this, but you might like this.
That seems to call for a book.
Yeah,
a whole book. Yeah, in addition,
right. One thing I would recommend when it comes to that, we don't necessarily have a written list, but your local county extension agent, such as Don, is a great resource. Your local nursery, some of the garden centers locally owned have great knowledge.
You're right, Charles, because right now in my inbox waiting for me to reply is someone moved here from the East Coast, and what can I plant instead of holly? What can I plant instead of the boxwood hedge that I have? So yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, contact us. And what about some of the things that are kind of just borderline hardiness? They're maybe not, they aren't going to just outright die. Right. They maybe didn't merit being on that non-hardy woody plants list. But what about some of the things that are kind of a little borderline?
Sure.
I'm thinking the Canadian roses. I mean, they're good, but this year they froze back they're going to come back. But there are lots of things that you kind of consider borderline. Does this address that at all?
I would say a couple examples that come to mind. John, you mentioned maples. Japanese maples are on the non-hardy list, but things like red maple, perfectly winter hardy, all over northern Minnesota, but our soil type is just not right for these. So we don't have red maple on the non-hardy list because it is winter hardy. It's just the alkaline soils that we have don't allow it to grow. So another example is blueberries. Same thing, super hardy. They grow in Alaska.
Because they're growing all over, in northern Minnesota.
Yep.
Sure.
But they're not on the non-hardy list because it's not that they're not winter hardy, it's that they don't like our soil.
Sure.
And an example of that I like to give, I get this question every once in a while when we get a new garden center comes in. They see our list for the first time and they might say, well, Contender Peach is labeled Zone 4. Why is it on here? And can I sell it? Why can't I sell it? Then the thing about our non-hardy list is you can still sell the tree. It has to have the label. And the local garden center would be able to explain, oh, you might be able to try it in a microclimate or a really protected spot or add extra protection over the winter. In these stores that a lot of material is bought for a wide range of stores all across the U.S., they're not able, or they don't typically have the staff that are knowledgeable enough to explain.
That's a good point, Charles, that it doesn't mean that these things can't be sold. Mm-hmm. For example, Contender Peach is one that some people have had success getting peaches successfully, but it means that they've taken extra measures, like you mentioned, a microclimate, somewhere in a sheltered yard that's going to get good snow catch, or they've taken extra measures for that. That reminds me, my mom's Uncle Ernie, who loved growing fruit, he got peaches to bear fruit. He made an igloo every fall out of straw bales.
Wow.
And so, I mean, for those of us not willing to make an igloo of straw bales around a peach tree, it should be on the non-hardy.
If you put in the effort sometimes.
Yes. So, I mean, that's a good discussion of how these things can be sold. But again, I'm happy they're labeled, so that we need to know we need to take extra measures on some of these things.
I want to jump back to one thing. You're talking about the nurseries that they apply for and they get these licenses. On social media now, sometimes you'll see people who will sell things. Is that illegal for somebody without a license to sell a woody plant? Are you dabbling in the black market if you do that?
Yeah, actually, yes. The way the law is written, it's any person has a huge, broad definition. Any person selling nursery stock is required to have a nursery license.
Okay.
So,
that's interesting, and for good reason. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we could get nursery stock being kind of sold here and there, spreading diseases, spreading insects, and good point.
So as a consumer, it's great to check to make sure whoever you're buying nursery stock from, even if it's a landscape project that's being done in your house, to verify that they're a licensed nursery and they're coming from a inspected area.
Yeah. Any other comments on kind of that program? Because then after a break, I want to talk about some of your own gardening. Sure. Any other comments about the program? Valuable program.
Yeah, we're going to be starting up inspections pretty quick here. I'm looking forward to seeing.
I suppose once the garden centers get full of material.
Absolutely. And I just want to say that I have great resources that I don't review this list all by myself. I reach out to NDSU experts, and I reach out to some of the big wholesalers. We kind of compare notes and look at hardiness and look for that new testing of new cultivars.
And it's actually a protection for the garden centers too, because they don't want to be selling things that die for people, because then people come back disappointed. So it's actually a good protection for the nurseries and garden centers themselves, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah, well, when we come back, let's talk about your own gardening.
Sounds great.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back with Charles Elhard, and we've been talking about what your job is as far as going out into the field and into stores to talk to people and to label and make sure that the things are available are winter hardy. But we wanted to see you also garden as well too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And with your background, you were trained in horticulture. You mentioned in your background gardening, and so I know you're an avid gardener. And you were on the Red River Valley yard tours. Was that this last summer?
Was this last summer, July.
Awesome. Well, how did you get started in gardening?
Oh, boy. I'll start with, I like to joke with people that when I'm out doing nursery inspections, I'm actually losing money those days because I'm seeing all these new plants and I want to definitely go back and spend what I earned. But I guess I would give credit to my Aunt Nancy growing up. She owned a greenhouse back home and got me into that. Both of my grandmothers had huge gardens, and there's a great picture of me with my soil bucket in the garden at age 3,
awesome.
helping tend the garden. So been doing
you
it a
beat
long
me.
time.
I was age 5. So, Great. And so, and then you, of course, trained at NDSU, and you've worked at garden centers. And tell us about some of the things that in your own yard you especially enjoy. Well, let's start with vegetables.
Sure, absolutely. I describe myself as a plant addict. my Instagram handle is Fargo Plant Addict even. But I'll grow all kinds of vegetables, flowers, fruits, you name it. But for vegetables, I like to dabble in all the new varieties that come out when I get all the seed catalogs in the mail, especially tomatoes and peppers.
Are you going to try the tomato that Burpee claims you can just put a seed in the ground right outdoors? I got to order the seed yet before it's sold out.
Don, I actually purchased those. I got the tomatoes and the pepper seed.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah, because there's a pepper that it says too. If they're sold out, I might have to ask you for a seed.
Sure.
If you spare a seed.
I'm a little skeptical with our late start, but I don't know. I'm very
awesome.
curious.
So you're going to try those. What are a couple of your favorite tomato varieties?
Well, I do a lot of canning myself. I do a lot of pizza sauce and salsa. So super sauce has been my go-to variety for quite a few years.
Super sauce, I've never seen that.
Oh, you never find it in garden centers.
So do you start the plants yourself from seed?
Yep, I started them myself.
Okay.
Yes. I have seen the seed at one of the box stores in town. I can't remember which one, but it's a Burpee variety.
Okay.
I've been growing it. I bet it's been almost 10 years now that one's been on the market. The plant habit is a little iffy, but the tomatoes
Is that the one that has fairly large size?
Yes.
Kind of a, would you call it aroma or a sauce type, paste type
It's a
maybe?
paste type, very little liquid inside, very few seeds. They claim that you can use one tomato fills a jar of salsa.
I think I've seen that, yeah.
They are really big, so that's
Awesome.
been one
I haven't tried that one. I've got to try super sauce.
Super sauce. Nice.
Yeah.
Any others, tomatoes?
Recommend. Of course, your old Big Boy and
Sure.
Big Beef, and there's some improvements on those now. I think like Big Beef Plus is one that I saw.
Yeah, that's one I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
And we've talked about growing melons before. You grow some melons, watermelon, muskmelon. Do you have a favorite watermelon? I'm always working on the best watermelon.
Yeah, sangria is a good.
That's
variety.
a great one. Yep.
It sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. That's a good one. And Sweet Dakota Rose.
Sweet Dakota Rose is a great one.
Yep. There's some good muskmelons and things.
Yeah, there's one the name is evading me. Cal Sweet, or it's a smaller variety.
Cal Sweet. I think that's the name. And of course, your yard was chosen not by random, but because your yard is beautiful is the reason it was on last year's Red River Yard and Garden Tours.
Sure.
And so tell us a little bit about your yard and your landscaping. Are there different things that you feature in your yard? Sure. Perennial flowers or shrubs?
Sure. So I have a small yard here just in Fargo, and but I like to grow things. So almost every inch is landscaped to some degree. I start a lot of my own seeds, annuals. I like to try the new perennials that pop up on the market. Sometimes I'm even trying new cultivars of trees and shrubs for the sake of the non-hardy list. Let's see what survives.
So your own test garden.
It's a little test garden. I don't get paid for that, but it's a lot of fun. I've ventured into various fruits. I have a mulberry tree. I'm trying to do an espalier apple.
Yeah, how is that going?
And not well.
that of course is where, and I never know, French words. I have a difficulty pronouncing it. Espalier,
something like that.
Is that kind of like where you grow it almost like on a trellis or on a form, and then it spreads off to the side?
All in one plane?
Yeah.
A lot of pruning. Pruning all the time.
Yeah, how old is the one?
Boy, I've had it. I think I'm at 6 years now. The cultivar is Mandan. I've been trying to graft. I wanted a different variety or a different cultivar on every branch, but success has been.
So, space-wise for small yards, if you could get the tree to just be flat and bear fruit, that takes up a whole lot less space.
Do you have it then against a fence or against because it needs a fair amount of structure.
It does.
It'll carry weight.
And it's up against my fence. Of course, I want to grow everything, so I don't want so much shade in my yard that I can't try all these different things. So that's helped with that as well.
Oh, sure. So it's less branching, less shade.
Yep. And last year I got about a dozen apples off of it. So
okay.
we're getting something. Enough for a couple pies.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some of the perennials that you are favorite in your yard?
Gas plant. It's
Yes.
pretty uncommon.
Gas
plant?
Gas plant.
Don't know
It's
this
called. It's a kind of a. Oh, I don't know how to describe it, but an oily.
Yeah, it's a
dark
long-lived
green,
perennial.
very long-lived.
Our common mentor, Professor
yes.
Neil Holland,
Yes.
when I was a young horticulturist, he had gas plant, and on a calm evening, I used to go do weeding and stuff for him. And on a calm night, he said, "Here, let me show you." And he smoked heavily, so he also had a lighter in his pocket. He said, "Let me show you this." So the gas plant was blooming, flower spikes, and he held his lighter at the base of the flower, and it poof. It exudes gas, hence the gas plant, and it's flammable. And so up went a little poof of flames. It has to be non-windy, non-breezy. But yeah, it's a fascinating plant. Yeah, have you ever tried lighting it?
I have.
It doesn't like explode and
Right.
burn everything up. But
If you pay attention, you can see it happen. But yeah, and it's got a nice scent. The oil smells almost citronella-y.
Exactly, and that just goes to show too the impact that someone such as Professor Neil Holland, who mentored so many of us in
Right.
horticulture, the effect that they have. So just think, Charles, in all of your travels around, how you are mentoring other people in horticulture, passing along your knowledge. Any other perennials, things that in your yard that especially shine? It's always fun to hear what everybody else is doing.
Sure. I like to grow. I'm trying to grow every color of monkshood that's out there.
Oh,
so far
monkshood.
I have.
I don't have that.
It's aconitum.
Yeah.
It's a poisonous plant, so not everybody can grow it. If you got small kids or pets you
yeah.
don't want to mess with. But there's when I was in Alaska a few years ago, they had every color. They had yellow and pink.
I've got to try that.
I have the dark blue is the most common in the trade. I have a bicolor, and I planted a yellow one. I need to get the white and pink yet. Giant fleece flower. I know you talk about that one a lot,
giant
Don.
fleece flower. That
Don
is
got us to grow
awesome.
one, because talking about that.
It
about
needs
that.
space.
Yep.
It takes space, but if you have a space to fill, that's the
Yeah,
plan.
and that's one you can almost watch grow overnight.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
incredibly fast.
It's a fun one for to mark the progress and to also make you feel it's easy enough to grow that it makes you feel like you've really accomplished
you've
something.
got something.
If you're a new
Yeah.
gardener and you have space and you want to fill it, that is that's a recommended.
Charles,
for
do
me.
you ever run into the case where there's all kinds of things you'd like to grow, but space all of a sudden gets...
absolutely.
Yeah, how do you deal with that? If something comes along and you think, well, I might like this one better than something I got, what do you do? Do you dig some things out, or what do you do once your space is full?
I do, and it kind of kills me to take these out. I try to give away plants as much as I can when a new cultivar comes out, or if I'm just not happy with how something is growing. At least give them to somebody, and if they throw them away, I don't need to know about it. But that's a hard one for me. But I do like to try all the new things that come out.
Okay, with that in mind, that your willingness to turn things over in your garden, is there something that you always have to have?
Is there something? Well, the gas plant for sure. That
Okay.
one's I'm not.
That's never
I'm
going
actually
away.
trying to get some started from seed. They're really hard to start, but I could have a whole yard full of those. I like to have a few herbs. I'll dry a few herbs. So I've got my oregano plant that comes back every year. No mint. I'm not touching that.
A little mint goes a long, long way.
The lilies. Lilies are one that I've gotten into. I like because they can grow, or you have different ones blooming all season
you mean
long.
like the true lily from the bulbs? And,
So
yeah.
Orientals or Asiatic, or you get those trumpet lilies or the hybrids that get really tall.
Yeah, those are awesome. Such impact
They add such
with those.
they add a lot of color, and so even though the rabbits seem to do great damage,
Like them, they like them as much as you do.
Speaking of, what do you have a method for? Because this is my most common question that I get. How do you control rabbits in your yard?
I've tried many different things. I've tried trapping them. That's not very effective. One of my neighbors, 90-year-old lady, once recommended to me, get your Irish Spring soap and use a potato peeler and put that around them. And it works great.
It did work for you?
It tremendously well.
What I always mention is for things like that, it will work for some people, for some plants with some rabbits. It may not work for everyone, but some of these things are worth trying.
Yeah.
How often do you have to repeal and
when you
soap the area?
After if it rains and it all melts away, then I'll put it down again. But and then once the tulips are pretty tall, then they stop bugging them. But yeah, that's worked pretty well. I have used some of the repellent sprays as well.
Some of those things are definitely worth trying. A very good gardener, and I don't doubt her success, was Gain dryer sheets.
Oh, sure.
Well, when I put out the Gain dryer sheets, I think the little rabbits used them to dry their clothes, and it had no success, hanging right on the roses, and just ate the roses. And so, but so it's interesting how some of those things, but they're worth a try.
They are.
Because you can lose some pretty expensive plants in a hurry.
Yes. I lost a.
Well, it's fun
apple
hearing
tree
about
this year.
your own yard and your own things. Are there any things that you've planted that you wished you wouldn't have, that you dug up and didn't mind throwing out?
Sounds like mint. You've got
Mint.
your mind.
Yes.
Was mint?
I
Is
caught
that
that,
from personal experience?
Yes, I've made the mint mistake before.
Sure. Anything else that you actually regretted? Any cautions to people that might steer clear
I
of?
mentioned Alaska. I had some fireweed I planted in my flower bed a few years ago, and it's starting to spread all over. That grows underground and by seed, and I'm starting to regret it. I really like it, but it's one of those that spreads all over.
Sure. Yep. So you don't have Lily of the Valley, or
No, I didn't go there.
in the right spot. In the right spot. Some of those things, surrounded by a concrete wall on all sides,
very locked in.
Locked in. Yep. Some of those can do well, but it's interesting.
I have some perennial vinca that is in one of those landlocked spots, and that's very aggressive.
Speaking of borderline, that is beautiful. The perennial vinca, kind of a ground cover viney.
Yeah.
How's it doing for you?
Phenomenal. It's actually in a very tight spot on the east side of my house, and it gets warm, so it's the first flower that's blooming in the spring. It does great, but I can't plant anything else there.
Your yard is established in established neighborhoods. I suppose there's kind of a microclimate. Snow maybe filters in.
Yeah,
See, I didn't see your yard last year. Yeah, that's when I fell out of the tree with a chainsaw, and I missed the tour.
I'm regretting that, missing your yard. This sounds really fascinating.
Yeah, maybe we can have a special tour this year.
We'll do that.
Exactly.
Anytime.
Yeah, but that's interesting because you mentioned the perennial vinca.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty. Anything else that you'd like to mention about your yard?
I would just encourage people to try all kinds of things. If you have a small yard, you can still plant a lot of plants. So
what's fun about that too is the more you plant. Old Neil Holland always said, "To grow it is to know it." Yep. Experience is the best teacher, and so you're just trying things, seeing how it works for you.
You said that you have a small yard. You want to try a bunch of different things, and just kind of looking at the idea of the espalier apple tree. What other things do you do to garden up, or to add height, or different things like that? Do you use different pots and planters and things like that? I mean, that's got to be a good way to try some things too.
I do, especially with annuals. I'll start stacking things and go up in the air, and I have little irrigation hoses running all over to keep those wet all summer. But I've tried things like, you'll see people garden in pallets, and they'll put herbs in pallets and lay them on the side of a building, just to get some more vertical to that. Yeah, I have pots everywhere.
Well, what about soil? Do you, in your perennial area, have you mulched the soil? Do you keep a mulch on that? What do you use?
I do. I'm a wood chip mulcher. Stay away from rocks. They're too hot for plants, but I really like cedar mulch or cypress mulch. Lasts a little bit longer than just wood chips.
Do you put anything under the mulch? Fabric?
Cardboard? I did do fabric in my front yard, and I kind of regret it because it's harder to switch things out.
Oh, boy, I agree.
Add things in. Trying to cut a hole in that fabric is a little difficult.
And weeds will sprout and find their way
they
to
will
root
anyway,
down
especially
through
your
it.
elm seedlings all spring.
That's true.
But no, in my backyard, I just have to either maintain my mulch or pull weeds and keep up with that.
I've been using cardboard under
sure.
because that deteriorates, and in the meantime, it has some pretty good teeth for preventing weed. What about the soil? Okay, you garden in Fargo's heavy clay soil too.
I do.
Are there some things that you do to amend the soil and make it more workable and plant friendly?
In my garden, for sure, I'm amending it all the time, adding peat moss, or I actually have backyard chickens, so I'm
you
cleaning
do?
the chicken coop and tilling that
Awesome.
in. So that's been helpful there. I really
The
wanted...
price of eggs. You're a hero.
Yeah, saving a little there.
Yes.
I did really want to grow blueberries, so I dug out a whole bunch of soil and filled it just straight peat moss, and that worked for a few years, but I'm sure that needs amending again. Got a handful of blueberries last year for the first time in 8 years.
Because I think University of Minnesota has a recommendation of you excavate like 2 foot by 2 foot, just totally excavate a couple of feet down and then amend peat. And
That's a lot of work.
A lot of work for a pint or so of blueberries, isn't it?
It is.
Exactly. So you're continually adding compost, the chicken manure.
Yep. And that's worked out pretty well. I get a decent crop every year.
Yeah, super. Yeah, because our soil is just so hard and heavy. Do you do composting at all, like in a compost bin or?
I had a tumbler for a while, but I wasn't consistent
It's
enough.
a lot of work.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. The consistency. It seems I never get to the back corner to turn the compost pile as often as I should.
Yeah.
And so,
that was always my problem too.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Good. Well, this has been great discussion.
Yeah.
This has been awesome.
Charles, if people have questions for you, how can they reach you?
Sure. So they can drop me an email at my Department of Ag email is celhard, so CELHARD @nd.gov, or give me a call at the Ag Department.
And Don, if people have questions for you, if they want to share their concerns over things or their victories, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu. I always spell it because it's easy to put an S instead of the Z, and it wouldn't reach me otherwise. So everyone, thanks for listening, and this has been great discussion. It's always so fun to chat with fellow gardeners. And thank you very much for protecting us, the consumers, when we go buy our plants.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving me the time.
Thank you.